The doctor's hands were trembling so violently she dropped the ultrasound probe. It clattered against the cold floor, but she didn't even look down. Instead, she rushed to lock the clinic door, turned off the monitor, and whispered the words that shattered my entire reality. "Emily, do not go home today. The man you married is not who you think he is. What is inside you isn't a baby." For 3 years, I believed I was living a fairy tale. My husband, Mark, was a wealthy, deeply attentive cybersecurity executive who promised to protect me from the world. When 2 pink lines finally appeared on my pregnancy test, I thought our perfect family was complete. I had no idea his suffocating affection was actually a meticulously designed psychological cage. As I lay shivering on that exam table, I realized the horrifying truth. I wasn't carrying our future. I was carrying a warning. And my fight to escape his twisted trap was just beginning. Before I ended up in that locked clinic room with a terrified doctor, my life was the absolute envy of everyone I knew. If you looked at us from the outside, Mark was the ultimate catch. He was brilliant, successful, and he treated me like I was made of spun glass. Shortly after we got married, he bought us a breathtaking, secluded mansion in the suburbs. It was surrounded by acres of private woods. A sanctuary just for us, he called it. Then, the gentle suggestions started. He noticed I was stressed at my graphic design firm. "The corporate world is too harsh for you, Emily," he'd say softly, tracing my jawline. "You don't need to work. Quit your job. Paint, read, relax. Let me take care of everything." It sounded like a dream, so I agreed. But looking back, that was the first bar of the cage. Once I was home all day, the isolation crept in quietly. My friends slowly stopped calling because Mark always had a reason why we couldn't see them. A sudden romantic weekend getaway, a migraine he was suffering from, or a surprise dinner he'd spent hours cooking. It was always wrapped in romance, so I never saw it as control. Because of his background in cybersecurity, he turned our home into a technological fortress. He installed high-end security cameras at every entrance, in the hallways, and even in the living room. "Just for your safety, darling. I need to know you're secure when I'm at the office." He also took over my bank accounts, claiming he wanted to optimize our investments. I didn't realize I was handing over the keys to my own independence. I was entirely dependent on him, watched by him, isolated with him. The real turning point happened 6 months ago. I woke up with a sharp, blinding pain in my abdomen. Appendicitis. Mark panicked, or at least he pretended to. He bypassed the local emergency room and insisted on driving me to an exclusive private hospital run by his college best friend, Dr. Vance. Only the best care for my wife, he insisted. The surgery was supposed to be a routine, minor procedure. I woke up groggy with Mark holding my hand, kissing my forehead, telling me everything went perfectly. A few weeks later, my body started changing. The morning sickness hit like a truck. I was constantly exhausted, my hormones were raging, and my period never came. When I finally took a pregnancy test and saw those 2 pink lines, Mark fell to his knees. He wept actual tears of joy, pressing his face against my flat stomach, whispering about how our family was finally complete. I cried with him. I thought it was a miracle. I thought he was the most loving father to be in the world. I had no idea that those tears of joy were actually tears of triumph. I had no idea that the surgery wasn't an appendectomy, and that the symptoms I was feeling weren't a miracle at all. It was the final lock clicking shut on my golden cage. The only reason I was in that specific clinic was because of a tiny, nagging voice in the back of my mind. Mark had insisted, almost aggressively, that I only see Dr. Vance, his best friend who performed my appendectomy, for all my prenatal care. But Dr. Vance's clinic always felt too monitored, too sterile, and Mark was always in the room, holding my hand so tightly it almost hurt. So I lied. I told Mark I was going to a private prenatal yoga class. Instead, I drove to a completely different town and paid cash to see Dr. Sarah, an independent OB/GYN highly recommended on a local forum. I just wanted one normal ultrasound. One moment with my baby without my husband's overwhelming presence. I lay back on the exam table, staring up at the ceiling tiles while Dr. Sarah applied the cold gel to my slightly rounded stomach. I smiled, waiting for the familiar rapid thump-thump-thump of a tiny heartbeat to fill the room. But the room stayed dead silent. I watched Dr. Sarah's face. She squinted at the monitor, her brow furrowing in deep confusion. She moved the wand to a different angle, pressing a little harder. Her eyes widened. The color completely drained from her face, leaving her as pale as a ghost. Is everything okay? I asked, my voice trembling. Is there no heartbeat? Did I lose the baby? That was when her hands started shaking so violently that she dropped the ultrasound probe. It clattered loudly onto the linoleum floor. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she rushed over to the monitor, turned the screen completely off, and sprinted to the clinic door, throwing the deadbolt lock. She even drew the blinds. When she turned back to me, her eyes were filled with absolute terror. She grabbed her personal cell phone, completely ignoring the clinic's landline. "Emily, listen to me very carefully," Dr. Sarah whispered, her voice tight with panic. "Do not go home today. The man you married is not who you think he is." I sat up, wiping the gel off my stomach, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What are you talking about?" "My baby. Emily, you are not pregnant." I laughed. A short, breathless, hysterical laugh. "That's impossible." I took 4 tests. They were all positive. "I have morning sickness, my clothes are getting tight, my hormones are being artificially manipulated," she interrupted, cutting through my denial like a knife. She turned the monitor back on and spun it toward me. "Look at this. Look closely." She pointed a shaking finger at a small, distinct metallic shape glowing stark white against the dark tissue of my uterus. It wasn't curved like a growing fetus. It was perfectly, mechanically rectangular. "What you are looking at is not a baby," Dr. Sarah said, her voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "That is a high-grade, synthetic hormone-releasing implant. It's illegal in this country. It is slowly pumping massive doses of pregnancy hormones directly into your bloodstream, mimicking every single symptom of a first-trimester pregnancy. That's why your tests are positive. That's why you're sick." The room started to spin. I couldn't breathe. "Why? Who would do this?" "It gets worse," she said, leaning in closer. "These specific implants are black market tech. They don't just release hormones. They emit a constant GPS signal. Emily, someone is tracking your exact biological state and your exact physical location 24 hours a day." The floor fell out from under me. The appendicitis surgery. 6 months ago. The sudden pain. Mark rushing me to Dr. Vance's private hospital. The sweet, loving husband who wouldn't leave my side while I was put under anesthesia. He didn't save my life. He had his best friend cut me open and plant a tracker and a chemical weapon inside my body. "Why?" I gasped, clutching my stomach, feeling violently ill as the reality of my perfect husband washed over me. "Why would he make me think I'm having a baby?" "Because of what comes next," Dr. Sarah said grimly. "In a few weeks, the hormone reservoir will run dry. Your hormone levels will crash violently. To you, and to the rest of the world, it will look like a devastating miscarriage. A trauma severe enough to cause a complete psychological breakdown. And your husband, the grieving, supportive man, will have the perfect excuse to declare you mentally unfit, take full medical power of attorney, and lock you away for your own safety. I wasn't a wife. I was a project. I was a hostage in a psychological horror movie, and the monster was the man who kissed me goodnight every single evening. I can call a domestic violence shelter right now," Dr. Sarah said, her fingers hovering over the keypad of her burner phone. "We can get you out the back door. You don't ever have to see him again." Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to sprint out of that clinic, disappear into the crowd, and never look back. But the cold, paralyzing logic of my situation washed over me like ice water. I shook my head, my nails digging so hard into my palms that they left crescent moon indentations. "I can't. You said it yourself, Sarah. There is a GPS tracker inside me. Mark is a cybersecurity executive. He designs surveillance systems for massive corporations. If I run, he won't just find me, He'll find me within the hour. I looked down at my stomach, a wave of profound nausea hitting me. And what happens when he does? He'll call the police. He'll play the frantic, loving husband. He'll tell them his pregnant wife is suffering from severe prenatal psychosis. That I'm a danger to myself and our unborn child. Because of the hormones pumping through my veins, I'll look crazy. I'll sound crazy. They will hand me right back to him, and he will lock me away in a psychiatric facility. I will never see the outside world again. Dr. Sarah slowly lowered the phone. She knew I was right. In a battle of my panicked word against a wealthy, articulate husband with medical records from his best friend, I would lose. "We need a strategy," Sarah whispered. She opened a locked drawer in her desk and pulled out a small, prepaid mobile phone. "I'm going to connect you with someone. Her name is Rachel. She's a lawyer who specializes in extracting women from high-net-worth abusers and extreme psychological control." I spoke to Rachel for exactly 10 minutes. Her voice was sharp, calm, and entirely clinical. She didn't offer me pity. She offered me a tactical plan. "Listen to me, Emily." Rachel's voice crackled through the cheap speaker. "Right now, Mark thinks he is playing chess against a blindfolded opponent. He thinks he has total control. That arrogance is his only weakness. To build an airtight legal case, to prove he planted an illegal medical device inside you, we need evidence. Financial records, encrypted emails, anything connecting him to Dr. Vance's black market purchase. You have to go back to that house. I have to sleep next to him." My voice broke. "Knowing what he did to me? You have to do more than that," Rachel replied, her tone unwavering. "You have to be the happiest, most devoted wife he has ever seen. Do not let your mask slip. Not for a single second. Because the moment he suspects you know the truth, your life is in immediate danger." The drive back to our secluded, heavily wooded estate was the longest hour of my life. I pulled my car up to the massive iron gates. Above me, the red light of the security camera blinked steadily. Mark was watching. He was always watching. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, taking deep, shuddering breaths. I practiced my smile in the rearview mirror. I practiced softening my eyes. I had to bury the terrified, violated woman deep inside my mind and resurrect the naive, loving Emily. I keyed in the gate code and drove up the sweeping driveway. When I opened the heavy oak front door, the smell of roasted garlic and rosemary hit me. Classical music was playing softly from the surround sound speakers. It was a scene straight out of a luxury lifestyle magazine. "Emily? Is that you, darling?" Mark walked out of the kitchen, wearing a casual sweater, drying his hands on a towel. He smiled, that handsome, charming smile that had once made my heart flutter. Now, it made my blood run absolutely cold. He walked over to me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders and pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. I forced my muscles to relax. I forced myself to lean into his chest, inhaling the scent of his expensive cologne. "How was prenatal yoga, my love?" he asked, his hand drifting down to rest squarely on my stomach, right over the spot where the metallic implant was buried beneath my skin. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed not to scream, not to slap his hand away, not to claw at his face. Instead, I placed my hand over his, squeezing it gently. I looked up into the eyes of the monster who was trying to systematically destroy my mind. "It was wonderful, Mark," I lied, my voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "I feel so. Connected to the baby today. I think everything is going to be just perfect." His smile widened, reaching his eyes. He bought it. Completely. "I'm so glad," he whispered, kissing my cheek. "I've got everything under control, Emily. I promise I'm taking care of our future." He turned back toward the kitchen to check on dinner. I stood in the hallway, staring at his retreating back. "You're right, Mark," I thought, a cold, diamond-hard resolve settling into my chest. "I am going to let you take care of everything. Right up until the moment I tear your entire life apart." The game of survival had officially begun. For the next 3 weeks, I lived a dual existence. By day, I was Mark's masterpiece, the glowing, submissive, pregnant wife. I let him paint the nursery. I let him pick out cribs. I smiled as he pressed his ear to my stomach, listening for a baby that didn't exist, while a tracking chip pulsed quietly beneath his cheek. It was a performance that demanded every shred of my sanity. But by night, the moment his breathing deepened into the rhythmic cadence of deep sleep, I became a ghost in my own home. Mark was a cybersecurity genius, which meant his primary work laptop was a fortress I could never breach. But Rachel, my lawyer, had warned me about men like him. Arrogance is a narcissist's blind spot, she had said over our burner phone. He believes you are too docile, too tech-illiterate to ever pose a threat. Look for his physical backups. Look for the things he thinks you're too stupid to find. On the 12th night, at 2 a.m., I found it. I was in his home office, a room he usually kept locked but had carelessly left cracked open after a late-night call. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would wake him. I systematically checked the false bottoms of his drawers, exactly as Rachel had instructed. Behind a row of heavy leather-bound books, my fingers brushed against cold metal. A hidden, biometric safe. But Mark's arrogance struck again. He hadn't bothered to wipe the keypad. Using a small UV flashlight Rachel had smuggled to me via a dead drop at the grocery store, I saw the smudged fingerprints. A 4-digit code. My birth year. He used the year I was born to lock away the secrets of my destruction. The safe clicked open. Inside was a ledger and a physical, encrypted hard drive. I plugged the small extraction USB Rachel had given me into the drive. The screen loaded, and the truth bled out in front of my eyes. There were offshore bank statements. 6 months ago, exactly 2 weeks before my appendicitis surgery, Mark had transferred $150,000 to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. A company completely owned by his best friend, Dr. Vance. The transaction note simply read, "Consultation and specialized hardware." But that wasn't the worst part. The next morning, while running the shower at full blast to drown out the sound, I called Rachel on the burner phone and told her what I'd found. "I've got the financial link," I whispered, the hot steam billowing around me. "It's airtight." He paid Vance to implant it. There was a heavy, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. When Rachel finally spoke, her clinical, detached tone was gone. It was replaced by a chilling urgency. "Emily, you are not the first," Rachel said softly. My breath hitched. "What?" "My investigators have been digging into Mark's past," she continued. "Before he moved to this state, he was married twice. Both women came from money or had significant assets. Both women miraculously got pregnant after years of trying. And both women suffered catastrophic miscarriages." I sank down onto the wet tiles of the shower floor, water cascading over my shoulders as the horror washed over me. The trauma of losing the babies allegedly triggered severe psychotic breaks in both of them, Rachel explained, reading from a file. Mark, playing the devastated, protective husband, used his connections to have them declared legally incompetent. He took full medical and financial power of attorney. He drained their accounts, sold their properties, and left them permanently institutionalized in private, high-security psychiatric facilities. They're still there, Emily. Heavily medicated, believing they lost their minds. He wasn't just a controlling husband. He was a psychological serial predator. He found successful, independent women, isolated them, broke their minds with synthetic chemicals, and harvested their lives to fund his empire. "We have enough to take him down," Rachel said. "The FBI is ready to move. We are securing the warrants today." I closed my eyes, relief finally threatening to crack my iron facade. We had him. It was almost over. "But there's one problem," Rachel added, her voice dropping. "We hacked his private calendar. He has a medical appointment scheduled for you with Dr. Vance for tomorrow night. The event is titled Phase 3 Extraction." My blood turned to ice. They weren't waiting. The artificial hormones were running out. They were planning to stage the miscarriage tomorrow. If I got into Vance's clinic, they would drug me, extract the chip, and my descent into madness would officially begin. I would wake up in a psychiatric ward, and the evidence inside my body would be gone forever. "You have to hold him off, Emily," Rachel ordered. "Do not let him take you to that clinic tomorrow. We need 24 more hours to get the federal judge to sign the arrest warrant." I hung up the burner phone, staring at my pale reflection in the steamy bathroom mirror. I was trapped in a house with a monster, and the clock had just run out. The next 24 hours were a waking nightmare. Outside, a massive thunderstorm rolled in, matching the suffocating dread building inside our secluded house. Rain lashed against the towering windows of the living room. I just needed to stall. One day. That was all Rachel needed to secure the federal warrants. I told Mark I was feeling incredibly fatigued, hoping to stay locked in the bedroom. But at 6 p.m., the heavy oak front door swung open. Mark was home early from the office. I walked out to the landing of the stairs and froze. Mark wasn't taking off his coat. He was standing dead still in the foyer, staring at a small, crumpled piece of paper in his hand. The air in the house instantly dropped 10 degrees. "Emily," he said. His voice wasn't raised, but the sweet, affectionate tone was completely gone. It was flat, cold, the voice of a machine. "Come down here." I descended the stairs, my legs feeling like lead. As I got closer, I saw what he was holding. It was a receipt for a parking garage. The parking garage right across the street from Dr. Sarah's clinic. I had missed it when I cleaned out my purse. "You told me you went to prenatal yoga on Tuesday," Mark said softly, his eyes locking onto mine with the intensity of a predator cornering its prey. "But this is a timestamp ticket from the medical district 3 towns over." "Who did you see, Emily?" My pulse roared in my ears. I reached into my pocket, my fingers wrapping around the small burner phone Rachel had given me. I blindly pressed the speed dial button that opened an open audio line to Rachel and the authorities. "I just wanted to look at some baby clothes at the boutique down there," I lied, forcing a smile. I lost track of time. Mark didn't blink. He reached behind him and slowly, deliberately, turned the deadbolt on the front door. Click. "Stop lying to me," he whispered, taking a slow step toward me. "I checked the vehicle GPS history today, Emily. I know you went to an independent clinic. I know you spoke to an obstetrician." The facade was over. The golden cage had just shrunk to the size of a coffin. "Dr. Vance called me an hour ago," Mark continued, his voice dangerously calm. He walked closer, forcing me to back up until my spine hit the cold plaster of the hallway wall. "He noticed an irregularity in your hormone telemetry. The levels are fluctuating early. You are under extreme stress. It's not safe for the baby. We are going to the hospital right now. I've moved the procedure up." "No," I said, my voice shaking but defiant. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Mark stopped inches from my face. The mask of the loving, devoted husband completely shattered, revealing the hollow, calculating monster underneath. "You don't have a choice," he sneered, towering over me. The psychological weight of his presence was suffocating. "You are sick, Emily. The pregnancy is making you paranoid and delusional. You're not thinking clearly. I am your husband, and I am going to take care of you, whether you cooperate or not." "There is no baby," I finally screamed, the truth tearing out of my throat. Tears of pure rage blurred my vision. "I know about the implant, Mark. I know about the black market tech. I know about the $150,000 you wired to Vance in the Cayman Islands." Mark went rigidly still. For a split second, genuine shock flickered in his eyes. He hadn't expected the docile, obedient wife he had manufactured to fight back. But then the most terrifying thing happened. Mark didn't panic. He laughed. It was a chilling, arrogant sound that echoed in the empty foyer. He shook his head, looking down at me not with fear, but with absolute pity. "Oh, Emily," he sighed, pulling his sleek smartphone from his jacket pocket. "Do you really think anyone is going to believe a word of that insane conspiracy theory? Look at yourself. You are sweating, hyperventilating, and ranting about microchips and offshore accounts. You are a hysterical, hallucinating pregnant woman experiencing a severe psychotic break." He typed a number into his phone, his eyes practically gleaming with triumph. "You think you're smart?" he taunted, holding the phone up. "I'm calling the private psychiatric transport right now. They'll be here in 20 minutes. I have Vance's medical files proving your history of mental instability. I have the legal paperwork ready. By tomorrow morning, you will be locked in a padded room, heavily medicated." right next to the other women who couldn't handle the pressure of our marriages. He pressed call and brought the phone to his ear. "You lose, Emily. You always belong to me." "You're right, Mark," I whispered, stepping away from the wall, my spine straightening. I pulled the cheap, plastic burner phone from my pocket and held it up. The call timer on the screen read 4:15. "I sound crazy. And if it were just my word against yours, you would win." Mark's eyes darted to the burner phone. His arrogant smile faltered. "But I'm not talking to the police," I said, my voice steady and crystal clear. "I'm talking to the FBI. And they have been listening to you confess to wire fraud, medical tampering, and the false imprisonment of your previous wives for the last 4 minutes." The phone slipped from Mark's hand, clattering onto the hardwood floor. Pure, unadulterated panic finally warped his perfectly constructed features. He lunged toward me to grab the burner phone. But he never made it. Through the howling wind and rain outside, the shrieking wail of a dozen sirens tore through the night. The flashing red and blue lights exploded through the living room windows, painting Mark's horrified face in strobe-light colors. "Police. Open the door." A voice boomed through a megaphone outside, shaking the very foundation of the house. Heavy, rhythmic pounding hammered against the solid oak door. Mark scrambled backward, tripping over the expensive rug. The brilliant cybersecurity executive, the puppet master who had controlled my every breath, was suddenly nothing more than a terrified, cornered rat. "Emily, please," he stammered, raising his hands, his voice cracking with desperation. "We can fix this. I love you. I did this to protect us." FBI. Breaching. The front door splintered inward with a deafening crack as a tactical team flooded the foyer. Armed federal agents in tactical gear swarmed the room. "Get on the ground. Show me your hands." I watched, completely numb, as they forced the man who had tried to steal my mind face down onto the floor. As the heavy steel handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, I didn't feel fear anymore. I just felt the first, beautiful breath of absolute freedom. The flashing lights of the police cruisers painted our pristine suburban neighborhood in frantic red and blue. I stood wrapped in a blanket on the front porch, surrounded by paramedics and federal agents, watching as Mark was marched down the driveway in handcuffs. The neighbors who had always envied our perfect marriage were now peeking through their curtains in absolute shock. But the real fight had just begun. Mark was wealthy, connected, and desperate. The next few weeks were a dizzying blur of sterile hospital rooms and stark legal offices. My first battle was reclaiming my own body. Under the strict supervision of the FBI and an independent forensic medical team, I underwent surgery. When the doctors finally extracted the small, rectangular black market implant from my tissue, it was immediately sealed in an evidence bag. That little piece of metal was the silver bullet that shattered Mark's entire defense. Mark hired the most ruthless, expensive defense attorneys money could buy. During the preliminary hearings, they tried to deploy his original plan. They attempted to paint me as deeply unstable, arguing that I had somehow sought out the illegal implant myself due to a delusional desperation for a child. They tried to frame Mark as a clueless, grieving husband trying to manage his wife's psychotic break. But my lawyer, Rachel, was a shark in a tailored suit. She didn't just bring a defense. She brought a legal avalanche. She presented the encrypted audio recording from my burner phone, capturing Mark's own terrifying threats. She laid out the financial paper trail, showing the $150,000 wire transfer from Mark's accounts to the Cayman Islands shell company. But the final fatal blow to Mark's empire of lies came from his own best friend. Dr. Vance, the man who had cut me open and planted the device, was arrested the same night as Mark. Terrified at the prospect of spending the rest of his life in a maximum security federal prison, Vance's loyalty evaporated in less than 48 hours. He took a plea deal. He flipped on Mark entirely, handing over every encrypted email, every medical falsification record, and every dark secret they had shared. Vance's testimony blew the lid off the darkest part of the case, the previous victims. Armed with Vance's records, Rachel and the FBI secured emergency court orders to intervene in the cases of Mark's first 2 wives. The psychiatric facilities where they had been locked away were raided. Independent psychiatrists evaluated them, and the horrifying truth was proven. They were not crazy. They had never been crazy. They were victims of severe, orchestrated chemical and psychological abuse. Seeing those two women walk out of those facilities, blinking in the sunlight after years of forced captivity, was the most profoundly emotional moment of my life. We hugged each other in the lobby of the courthouse, three strangers bound together by the trauma of surviving the same monster. The trial didn't last long after that. Faced with an insurmountable mountain of forensic evidence, a co-conspirator's testimony, and 3 verified victims, Mark's high-priced lawyers advised him to plead guilty to avoid a life sentence. I sat in the front row of the courtroom on the day of his sentencing. Mark stood before the federal judge, his expensive tailored suits replaced by a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. His arrogant posture was gone. His eyes, which used to look at me with such calculated control, were fixed firmly on the floor. The judge's voice echoed loudly through the silent room, condemning him for medical fraud, aggravated identity theft, wire fraud, and multiple counts of false imprisonment. Mark, you used your intellect and resources not to build a life, but to construct psychological prisons for the women who trusted you, the judge stated sternly. You are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, without the possibility of early parole. As the bailiffs led him away in chains, he finally looked up and met my gaze. He expected to see the terrified, broken girl he had tried to mold. Instead, I gave him nothing but a cold, unwavering stare. He had tried to bury me in a golden cage, but he had only succeeded in teaching me how to break the bars. It has been 2 years since the heavy steel doors of a federal prison slammed shut on Mark. The healing process wasn't overnight. Psychological trauma leaves invisible scars, the kind that make you second-guess your own memories and doubt your own judgment. For the first few months, I still caught myself looking for hidden cameras in my apartment, or flinching when a phone rang. But with intensive therapy, the support of my reconnected friends, and the fierce, unyielding friendship I built with Mark's 2 previous wives, I slowly took my life back. I returned to my career in graphic design, not as a submissive wife passing the time, but as an independent woman owning her craft. More importantly, I used a large portion of the financial settlement from Dr. Vance's hospital malpractice lawsuit to start a legal defense fund. It specifically provides high-tier legal representation and burner phones for victims trapped in situations of extreme coercive control and psychological abuse. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my story, it is this: abuse does not always leave physical bruises. Sometimes, the most dangerous predators don't raise their fists. They raise their voices in mock concern. They don't lock you in a basement. They build you a beautiful, sprawling mansion and slowly convince you that the outside world is too dangerous. Control, no matter how sweetly it is packaged, is never love. Love empowers you. It doesn't isolate you. Love trusts you. It doesn't track your GPS coordinates. Love encourages your independence. It doesn't steal your bank accounts to protect you. If you are in a relationship where you feel like your reality is constantly shifting, where your friends are slowly disappearing, and where your partner's care feels like a suffocating blanket, please trust your gut. You are not crazy. You are not alone. There is a way out, and there are people, lawyers, doctors like Sarah, and advocates, ready to fight for you. Your life, your mind, and your body belong to you. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video. You never know who might desperately need to hear it right now. Stay safe, trust your intuition, and I will see you in the next video.